In the annals of crime history, two names stand out for their gruesome acts and the mysteries that shroud them: Jack the Ripper and H. Holmes. Now let's take a chilling journey back to the late 19th century, a time marked by the sinister deeds of these two infamous killers. We begin with Jack the Ripper, an unidentified serial killer who wreaked havoc in the Whitechapel district of London in 1888. This phantom of the night targeted impoverished women, with most of his victims being prostitutes. His brutal attacks involved throat cutting and abdominal mutilations, and despite the intense media coverage and police investigation, the Ripper's identity remains a mystery. The social and economic conditions of Whitechapel at the time, rife with overcrowding, poverty and social unrest, only aided the Ripper's ability to elude capture. Across the Atlantic, around the same time, another figure of terror was emerging. Herman Webster Mudgett, better known by his alias H. Holmes, was an American con artist and serial killer. His reign of terror spanned from 1891 to 1894, and unlike the Ripper, Holmes' crimes weren't just limited to murders. He was a master of deception, engaging in insurance fraud, bigamy, and even grave robbing. Holmes confessed to 27 murders, but was only convicted and executed for one. He is best known for his infamous murder castle in Chicago, a place where exaggerated tales of torture chambers added to his terrifying reputation. So here we have two murderers, operating in the same era, but on different continents. Jack the Ripper, a shadowy figure haunting the streets of London, and H. Holmes, a man whose criminal career was marked by manipulation and deceit in the heart of America. Two murderers, two continents apart, yet their stories have been intertwined by speculation and mystery. A serial killer is often defined by their modus operandi, a distinctive way of operating which sets them apart. The methods of Jack the Ripper and H. Holmes, two infamous killers of the late 19th century, starkly contrast each other, painting a chilling picture of their individual psyches. Let's start with Jack the Ripper, a figure shrouded in mystery and terror. His reign of fear was concentrated in the impoverished Whitechapel district of London during the year of 1888. The Ripper targeted vulnerable women, primarily those working in the oldest profession. His brutal attacks were characterized by throat cutting and horrific abdominal mutilations. The sheer brutality of his acts, coupled with the fact that he was never caught, adds an undying sense of dread to his name. On the other side of the pond, around the same period, we find H. Holmes, a man whose criminal career was marked by deception and manipulation. Unlike the Ripper, Holmes's identity was well known. Born Herman Webster Mudgett, he adopted the alias H. Holmes and embarked on a life of crime that included insurance fraud, bigamy, and murder. Holmes's modus operandi was as deviously cunning as it was cold-blooded. His infamous murder castle in Chicago was a testament to his deceptive practices. This building, purportedly filled with hidden rooms and trapdoors, was where he carried out his heinous crimes. Holmes was driven by financial gain and the protection of his lifestyle. His victims were lured into his trap with sweet words and promises, only to meet a gruesome end. Unlike the Ripper's victims, who were brutally attacked and left in the open, Holmes's victims vanished without a trace, swallowed up by the labyrinthine murder castle. In terms of their modus operandi, Jack the Ripper and H. Holmes couldn't be more different. One was a shadowy figure who left his victims in plain sight, his violent acts a terrifying statement. The other was a charismatic con man who hid his crimes behind closed doors, his victims disappearing as if they were mere figments of the imagination. While both killers left a trail of terror, their methods couldn't have been more different. In the grim tale of serial killers, the victims often tell a story of their own. As we delve into the tragic stories of those who fell prey to Jack the Ripper and H. Holmes, we see a pattern of vulnerability exploited by the ruthless. The victims of Jack the Ripper were mainly impoverished women, many of whom were forced into prostitution by the harsh economic and social conditions of London's Whitechapel district in the late 1800s. These women, Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly, known as the Canonical Five, were subjected to brutal attacks involving throat cutting and abdominal mutilations. Their lives were cut short by the Ripper, their stories forever etched into the annals of true crime. On the other side of the Atlantic, H. Holmes preyed on the unsuspecting. His victims were often entangled in his web of deceit, drawn in by his charm, and the promise of employment or lodging at his infamous murder castle. Holmes was not as discriminate as the Ripper in his choice of victims. His confirmed victims ranged from children to adults, both male and female. His killings were not driven by a love of bloodshed, but by financial gain and the protection of his lifestyle. The backgrounds of these victims reveal their vulnerability. The women of Whitechapel were desperate, living on the edge of society, while those who fell into Holmes's trap were often naive, lured by the promise of a better life. Both sets of victims were easy prey for these predators, their lives tragically cut short by the hands of these monsters. While the circumstances leading to their unfortunate encounters with these killers varied, there is a chilling similarity in their stories. They were all victims of their time, caught in the crossfires of a society that was rapidly changing and often indifferent to their fates. The victims, though diverse in life, met a similar cruel end at the hands of these ruthless killers. Their stories serve as a stark reminder of the human cost of these infamous crimes. Their lives tragically reduced to footnotes in the dark annals of history. Time, they say, reveals all, but in the case of these killers, it only deepens the mystery. Let's delve into the timelines of terror etched by Jack the Ripper and H.H. Holmes and explore the shadows of the past. The year is 1888. London's Whitechapel district is gripped by fear as the Ripper carves his bloody path through the impoverished streets. The canonical 5 victims are claimed in a span of just 10 weeks, painting a chilling portrait of frenzied brutality. Yet the man behind the moniker remains a phantom, slipping through the grasp of the authorities and into the annals of unsolved mysteries. Fast forward to the early 1890s. Across the Atlantic, Chicago finds its own demon in the form of H.H. Holmes. His reign of terror spans 3 years, from 1891 to 1894. All the while, Holmes's charm and cunning allow him to maintain a facade of respectability, even as he leads his victims into the depths of his infamous murder castle. 2 cities, 2 killers, 2 timelines. But here's where things get interesting. There's an overlapping period here, a window in history where both these men were active. The Ripper's last known murder was in November 1888. Holmes, on the other hand, was already in Chicago by 1886. This overlapping period has sparked intense speculation. Could Jack the Ripper and H.H. Holmes be one and the same? Could the Ripper have fled London, only to re-emerge in Chicago as Holmes? Of course, there are differences in their methods, their victims, and their motivations. But the question persists, gnawing at the edges of these century-old mysteries. The timelines offer tantalizing hints, but no definitive answers. The identities of both killers have been the subject of countless theories, yet none have been conclusively proven. 2 timelines, 2 series of murders, yet an enigma that remains unsolved. As the years roll on, the shadows cast by Jack the Ripper and H.H. Holmes continue to loom large over the annals of criminal history, a chilling reminder of the monsters that once walked among us. Theories and speculation can sometimes overshadow the facts, making the truth even more elusive. Yet they provide us with intriguing pathways to explore. In the mysterious world of Jack the Ripper and H.H. Holmes, one theory stands out. Could they have been the same person? Jeff Mudgett, in his book Bloodstains, unveils a startling claim. Mudgett, a direct descendant of H.H. Holmes, suggests that his infamous ancestor was, in fact, the elusive Jack the Ripper. These allegations stem from a series of diaries supposedly belonging to Holmes, where he allegedly admits to the Whitechapel murders. But, as with any theory, this one too has its critics. Skeptics argue the lack of concrete evidence and the discrepancies in the killer's modus operandi, among other factors. Meanwhile, the History Channel's documentary American Ripper takes this speculation a step further. The series explores the possibility of Holmes faking his own death and escaping to London, where the Ripper murders began. The documentary presents a timeline that aligns with this theory, further fueling the speculation. However, this too has been met with skepticism, as some argue the timeline is circumstantial at best. The theory also faces challenges when considering the differences in the killer's victims and their social backgrounds. Holmes targeted people he could exploit for financial gain, while the Ripper preyed on impoverished women in the downtrodden district of Whitechapel. Would one man really exhibit such disparate victim profiles? Regardless of the validity of these theories, They add another layer to the enigma surrounding these notorious killers. They allow us to delve deeper into the macabre fascination we have with these figures as we attempt to unravel the twisted minds behind such heinous acts. While the truth may never be known, the speculation continues to fuel the fascination with these infamous killers.